Hello everybody and welcome back to Unlocking Unreal Engine. If you remember last time, we had to move a couple of the systems around, like the game mode and the HUD, so we could put a nice reticle on screen, which of course right now is just a giant box. As you can see, it's a little big and unwieldy, but we got it on there. Today we're going to shrink that just slightly, and then we're going to learn about timers and how we can use those to send information to the HUD in order to put a prompt on the screen. Before we get going, I do want to mention my Patreon down below. It's getting harder for me to get videos out, and I want to bring you guys this quality content. I want to make sure I'm getting it to you regularly, and that's the best way you can support the channel. That being said, I am also doing one-on-one mentoring. If you're interested in me checking out your project or helping you learn the engine in a more one-on-one environment, feel free to send me an email at darkslayertv@gmail.com. But without further ado, let's get started. So first things first, our reticle is way too big. So I'm gonna go into where I created it, which was in UI main canvas. And right now, if I were to click on it, you'll see on the right-hand side, it's set to 32 by 32. I think that's way too big. We're gonna do something like 8 by 8. And I'm gonna hit compile and save. And we'll just go do a quick test. Does that seem to be a bit better? Yes, it's still a bit large. I think in most games it'd be a little smaller, but for now, I think that's a lot better. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. We're going to use timers, so that way we can send something we're looking at a message that says, hey, I'm trying to see what your prompt is. Then it'll update the HUD with whatever its designated prompt is. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and hit Control Space. And I'm going to head over to my interfaces folder, and we're going to go to the BPI interaction. You'll remember we created the interaction request in here. This is the message that we're sending a random blueprint, or specifically the one we're looking at when we hit the interact button, and it gets interacted with. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add function. And we're going to call this prompt_request instead. This one is not going to deliver a payload, as in it's not going to have an input or an output. It simply needs to let the object know that we are looking at it, and we'll do that with the prompt request. So we're going to hit compile and save on that, and we'll head over to whatever your character is. So I'm going to go to my first person. I'm going to go to blueprints, and I'm going to open up that first person character. If you remember, we went ahead and we created an input request thing where we hit the button, we see if we're looking at anything, and then we try to interact with it. We're going to be doing something very similar, but now instead of putting it on a button, it's going to be on a timer. So I'm going to create a custom event, and I'm going to call this start_prompt timer, like that, with a Control-Shift-S to save all. And out of the prompt timer, I am going to pull out, and I'm going to do a timer by event. Now, what a timer by event means is we have to plug in an event, and what it's going to do is run that event one time after the amount of time that we put in has passed. However, if we do looping, it will do it an infinite amount of times, repeating at the time we put in. So for example, if I was to have this not looping and press 1 second, after 1 second, it would run whatever event we plug in. However, if it was looping, after 1 second, forever, it's going to do a event. So 1 event, 2 event, 3 event, so on and so forth. However, this is going to be for a prompt, so we need it to be a little bit snappy. Now, some people will put this on the event tick, and honestly, nowadays, that's fine. I'm just a little bit picky because I feel like we don't need 60 to 120 prompt checks every second, depending on your frame rate. So what I like to do is come in here and simply make this 0.2, and that'll make it 5 times a second, which is still pretty fast. However, you could even still do like 0.1, and then you're getting 10 times a second, and that's even faster, and still not happening on every frame. So that's why I like to use a timer instead of the event tick. But anyway, when we call start prompt timer, every 0.2 seconds, forever looping until we stop it, we need it to do something. We're going to pull out of the event, and we're going to pull down and create another custom event. And you'll see that it's going to plug straight into that custom event. And I'm actually going to call this prompt check. However, I did forget a step, so let's do that real quick. Out of the timer, we're actually going to use this return value as a variable. So I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to promote it. This is so we can access this timer at any point. So this starts the timer. This makes it a reference that we can actually reference. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the left-hand side now. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this TH for timer handle. That's what they're called. And I'm going to do timer handle or TH underscore prompt check, compile and save, do a Control-Shift-S even, make sure it's all saved. Anyways, the event we're going to run is a prompt check. Now, you can imagine we actually already have some of the code we need for this. Remember the line trace first person we created that checks to see if we're looking at something when we press the interact button? The good news is we can repurpose this code and also use it for our prompt check. So if I pull out the line trace first person, I'll move it like, I don't know, right about here. I'll hold B and click for a branch because this is going to check and see if we hit anything. So I'll right click and I'll type in, did we hit anything, like that? And the range, of course, might as well be the reach length because we really probably shouldn't see the prompt if we're unable to interact with it. Then we are going to pull out and we're going to type in break so we can break the hit result. We're going to open that up. And what we need to do is take that hit actor and we need to see if it implements an interface. Do you remember why we do this? Because whenever we made our interact system, this is kind of how we're telling if something's interactable. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to see if it contains that BPI interaction, because if it does, it more than likely has a prompt set. So did we hit anything? If true, was it something that is implementing our interaction interface? This is it interactable? Question mark. Now, to be fair, I guess that's not a fair question. It's more like, does it implement the interaction interface? The reason I say that's not fair and I'm rewording it is because technically something could have a prompt and not have an interaction. Like maybe you want them to look at a sign and it tells them what the sign says at the bottom, but there's no need to interact with it. So I'm just renaming it so it's very easy to read. Okay, did we hit anything? If yes, does it implement our interface? If yes, we need to send it a prompt check. And if you remember, what we're going to do is we're going to type in prompt request because that's what we named it in the interface. And we're going to take true and plug it in. However, of course, it will need a target. And we're going to use the hit actor that we just checked to send it a message. And then I'm going to double click the line here and reroute some of these wires so it's a little easier to see. Control-Shift-S, compile and save. So now what we need to do is a couple things. First, we need to start the prompt timer. As of right now, this isn't being ever called, so this looping timer on prompt check will never be called, but we also need a way to stop it in case we need to stop it. So this will be called underscore prompt check, like that. Or prompt timer, I suppose, so that way it is very clear. Let's change that. Stop prompt timer. So if we call stop prompt timer, what we need to do is we need to get our timer handle for the prompt check. And there's actually an extra step. You would think we might be able to just pull this out and stop it. But just in case there's some kind of error inconsistency in our code, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out and we're going to say, does timer exist by handle? And basically what this is going to do is simply return whether or not this handle even exists. So maybe for some reason we call to stop the timer. It doesn't even exist. Now we have an error. But by simply doing this check, we're just saying, does it exist? If it does, what we're going to do is I'm going to copy this, bring it over so it's a little bit cleaner. We're going to pull out and just hit stop, or I'm sorry, not stop, clear and invalidate timer by handle, just like that. We'll right click. Does timer handle exist? There we go. And I'll go ahead and grab this and I'm going to put a comment around it and it's going to say prompt check. Now we are going to come across not necessarily an error, but it's going to behave in a way that we don't want it to, but we'll get to that when it arises. So now we need to make it so our interactable objects can react to a prompt request. What we're going to do is I'm going to hit Control Space. I'm going to go to my BPs folder, into my actors, and let's do the BP door system first. In the BP door system, on the left-hand side, I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call it prompt. Then we are going to set that variable to text, and I'm going to click this eyeball. Do you remember what it does when you click on the eyeball? It makes it public. But what does that mean? It does mean it's the main thing that we're worried about is it means if we click on it out here in the world, in the details panel, it is now something we can change on an instance to instance basis. You don't have to do this. If you want every single one of your doors to have the same prompts, you're free to do that. However, I'm just showing you a way that can make it a bit more dynamic if that's what you need. So we have a variable for prompts. Now we need to open our interfaces, and the door already has that interaction interface on it, which means it can have a prompt request because we added that function. So I'm going to double click on it, and right now it's saying, hey, you got a prompt request. So what we need to do is send our unique prompt to the HUD so the HUD can then display it. However, in order to do that, we're going to hit Control Space. We're going to go to our BPs. We're going to go to our interfaces, and we're going to go to the HUD. We need a way to send the HUD that message, and we already have a communication channel through the interface. So I'm going to hit Add Function, and I'm going to call this prompt underscore request, like that. And this one is going to need a payload. So I'm going to hit the plus on the inputs, and I'm going to change this to prompt, and we're going to make that some text as well. And we're going to hit compile and save. So back in the door system, if you remember how to get the HUD, it's kind of weird. You have to get do you remember? It's in the player controller. So you have to get the player controller. And in the player controller, we're going to get the HUD. And now what we can do is out the HUD, we can send that prompt request message. Now, we named two things exactly the same. So there is a better way to name this so you don't get confused. But remember that it does tell you what you're sending specifically. And we need the one for the HUD. You're going to see there's one for interaction in HUD. Click on the one for the HUD and plug this in. And the payload we're going to be sending is, of course, the variable that we set to public, like that. Compile and save. So let's go ahead and think about what's happening. We're looking around, and every 0.2 seconds, we send a line forward, and we say, hey, is what we're looking at interactable? If it is, tell it we need its prompt. And so whenever it receives that, hey, we're looking at you, we need your prompt, it says, oh, I have a prompt, let me send it to the HUD. Now the HUD receives the prompt. I hope this is making sense so far. So now we need to define what the HUD does whenever it receives its message. So let's go to interfaces, let's go to systems and then HUD. And on the left, we need to open up interfaces, and you'll see we have prompt request. However, this one does contain a payload, so we can actually update some information. Right now, if we were to hit Control Space and go to our UI, specifically the one with the canvas, we have nothing here that can accept the prompt. So we need to add that to our canvas first. This is something that, remember how we added the reticle separate? We put it onto the canvas as a separate widget. In this case, I've never found a really good purpose for adding a prompt as a second widget. If you know of one, feel free to do it. It's perfectly fine, but we're not going to do it here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my canvas. If I'm clicking on the reticle and I was to add text, it would become a child of the reticle. If you know what that means, great. If you don't worry about it right now. Just make sure you have the canvas panel selected, and we're going to type in text, and we're just going to take text, not the rich, just the regular, and we're going to drop that to roughly the bottom middle like that. First thing I want to do though is rename it. So at the top right here where it says text block _0, I'm going to get rid of that 0, and I'm just going to type this in as prompt. The anchors, if you remember, anchors are I need you to be this many pixels away from the anchor, no matter what size shape the screen is in. So we need to go to anchors, and we're going to hold in Control and Shift, and we're going to click on the bottom middle one. Because the prompt, we always want it to be centered and a certain amount from the bottom, no matter how big or wide the screen is. You could get away with putting this in the middle as well, but I like the bottom. For our position on the Y, I'm going to put like -200, maybe -250, something like that. Looks good to me. On text, because I want to know what this is and it's not going to show up on screen, I'm going to erase text block, and I'm going to put _ph for placeholder, and then underscore again prompt. And then what that does is it shows me text still, so I can see what I'm manipulating, but at the same time, it also kind of tells me what it is. The justification, I'm going to go ahead and put this centered, so that way, as you can see, it will always stay centered and keep growing equally in both directions. And then I'm going to go to my font here, and I'm going to open this up. I think 24 is pretty small. I'm going to double that and go to like 48. Prompts tend to be pretty large. And because it's hard to read text over multicolored backgrounds, and you'll never know what they're looking at because your game's going to be dynamic, I also like to add an outline. So you'll see under font, there's also the outline setting. I'm going to set this to like 3, and it automatically does black, which I think is perfect for our testing purposes. I will hit compile and save. However, as of right now, we can't update this even still. That's because whenever you have something that needs updated on the HUD or like in a UI element like this, it has to be a variable. So with our text selected, at the top right, we can change it to is variable. So now this can be updated. Now here's where things get a little confusing for new people whenever they're dealing with widgets for the first time. Well, first let's compile and save. But up here at the top right, there's not only the designer, there's also a graph, which means that your widgets can have code that make them function as well as the designer side, which makes sense conceptually, but when you're messing with this system for the first time, it's a little weird. When we're in the graph, on the left-hand side, you'll see that we have a set of variables. I'm going to create a new one, and I'm just going to call this prompt text, and I'm going to make this a set of text and hit compile and save. In the designer, so back at the designer, I'm going to have my text selected. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to bind the text to a variable. So if that variable changes, the text also changes. So you'll see text, we got the placeholder prompt, but on the right, we can bind it. And you'll see that you can see the prompt text there. I'm going to click it, and I'm going to hit compile and save. Now, as you can see, it still keeps our placeholder here so we can see what we're looking at. And if we were to hit play, it wouldn't have anything there because by default, if we click on the prompt text, it's empty. This variable doesn't exist. Well, it exists. It's an empty variable, so it's not going to display anything. However, if this was to display something, it would show up on the screen. So what we're going to do is take one step back and go back to the HUD. Remember, the HUD had just received the payload, and it says, oh, look here, I have a prompt. And we already have a reference to the main canvas, so I'm going to pull the main canvas out and do a get. I'm going to right click it, and we're going to do a validated get just in case. Then out of the main canvas, we can actually access those variables. So I'm going to set prompt text like that, and we only want this to run if it's valid. And we'll take our prompt and plug it in like this. Now, some of you, especially some of you that have coding experience, are screaming right now, and I think it's important that I address what I just did and why some people are screaming. I just did something that I broke. I broke a rule. It's called encapsulation. Essentially, whenever you create a blueprint or a widget, it has to contain itself and operate itself. So whenever I take the main canvas and I reach inside of it from a different blueprint and change a variable, that's technically bad. However, it's also not a big deal. As long as you understand the rule enough to break it whenever it makes sense, you're good. But if you don't understand the rule, practice encapsulation. Instead of this, maybe I send another interface message and I say, hey, you need to update your prompt. Therefore, it can contain its variable within itself and update itself. That's encapsulation. For me, when it comes to HUD elements, specifically the prompt, I'd rather not send another interface message. Again, we're talking about little minute things that are good practices, but they're not going to make or break your project, I promise. Okay, cool. So let's go through the process again. Every 0.2 seconds, we're going to shoot out a line. Are you interactable? If yes, I need your prompt. Then the door receives it and goes, oh, you need my prompt? Here, yeah, let me get it to the HUD for you. Then the HUD takes it and goes, oh yeah, I have just the place for that. Let me update the variable in the main canvas so that way it shows up on screen for you. Now, it is going to not work the way we want it to, but that's expected. Let's hit play and see what I'm talking about. So if I go to look at the door, first off, nothing's going to pop up because I didn't set a prompt. So let's set a prompt first. We're going to make the prompt say, hello, YouTube viewers. You're so cute. Like that. Control-Shift-S. Then I'm going to hit play. And now, whenever I move over and look at the door, nothing happens. I'm silly. We never actually started the prompt timer. So it's never actually looking to see if we're looking at anything. So I'm going to go to the top of all my code here, and I'm going to hit P and click to get the event begin play. And this is such an important event. I always like to just put a comment around it specifically that says begin play. I like to turn it completely red, so turn green to 0, turn blue to 0, and I even have show bubble when zoomed. And basically, if I ever zoom out, it's so obvious where the begin play is. I just do that because you're going to eventually start using this a lot. But anyway, okay, so out of the begin play, we need to run the event we created called start prompt timer. So that way we start looking for prompts. Otherwise, they probably won't show up. So we're going to start prompt timer, just like that. And we will hit compile and save. Have I ever mentioned what begin play is? I don't know if I have, and since this is kind of a beginner tutorial, let's talk about it real quick. Event begin play happens whenever it is the first frame for that actor. So for the most part, when you hit play game, that's event begin play. That first frame, that's when that's fired. However, I say it's for the first frame for that actor because let's say we create an NPC and then we spawn him in. If he was not currently present, when he spawns in, that is event begin play for him. That is when he's going to run the event begin play code. So yes, it's the first frame whenever we hit play. However, it's technically the first frame when an actor is spawned, created. And it doesn't have to be an actor, it could be an object. You know what I mean. Anyway, we have the prompt timer going. So let's go back to the map and hit play. And this time we should hopefully see it. There it is. Hello, YouTube viewers. You're so cute. I'm going to use this time to remember to tell you to like, comment, and subscribe, by the way. However, what is the issue? What's that thing I was talking about? Like, it's popping up, right? Yes, but now it's never going away. So how do we fix it so it goes away if we're no longer looking at it? So this gets a little bit more complicated, but nothing you guys won't be able to handle, I'm sure. I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this target actor, and it is going to just be a actor reference and specifically an object reference, and I'm going to hit compile and save. So the reason we've created something called target actor is because whenever we put a prompt on screen, we want that to be the target actor. Why? Because whenever we are no longer looking at it or we look at something new, we can compare it to the target actor. Is this the same thing or is it something new? Don't let it confuse you. Let's take a look. So let's think about it. Did we hit anything? Well, first off, if we didn't hit anything, we can clear the prompt because clearly we're no longer looking at something that has it. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to get the player controller. And out of the player controller, we are going to get the HUD, or I'm sorry, just get HUD. And we're going to send it a prompt request message. Remember, you specifically want the one for the HUD. And all I'm going to do is empty the payload. I'm going to send an empty payload that says, clear it, we don't need anything. Okay, so we didn't hit anything, so that's one way to clear it. I'm going to take my comment, by the way, and give me a lot of space here. So we cleared it because we didn't hit anything. Well, we did hit something, and it does implement the interaction interface. Oh, okay. Okay, well, what if we hit something, but it doesn't implement the interaction interface? So, like, we look at the floor. Well, we did hit something, but it doesn't have a prompt, so boom. Look, again, another use to go ahead and clear the prompt. We're going to go ahead and add, by the way, some reroute nodes. Because we're going to have a lot of things plugging into this, and I want it to look nice and fresh, easy to read. Okay, well, let's move this out real quick. So it does implement the interface, or let's run through this. We hit something, it does have the interface, but what if it's the same thing? Do we need to tell it to update the prompt again? No. So what we'll do is we'll get our target actor, which is none by default. Remember, this isn't set, so it's none by default. And what we'll say is the target actor equal to the actor that we just hit? We'll create a branch with B. So it doesn't implement the interface. And is this the actor we were already looking at? So let's go ahead and write that in. Is this the same actor as previous? Because if it is the same actor as previous, we don't want to send a prompt request. That's unnecessary data flying around. The prompt's already on screen, so we don't do anything with true. However, if it's not the same as the last target actor, then what we need to do is take the target actor and we need to set it. So it's not the same actor, so false. Well, let's go ahead and make a new pin like right here and plug it in. So it's not the same actor, so it's a new actor, and we know it's interactable because we've made it to this point. Okay, well, I guess let's go ahead and send it a prompt request. We are almost there. However, if you think about it, if we set target actor, let's look at the door. We look at the door and we run through this logic. We hit the door, it has the implemented interface. This isn't the same actor as previous because currently it's set to nothing. So it's going to set the door and it's going to send it a prompt request. But that'll never clear. So even if we don't hit anything, let's say we look away from the door and it does clear the prompt request, the target actor is still set. Meaning if we look at the door, the logic right now says, well, we don't need to send it a prompt request because it's the previous actor. But we've already cleared the prompt. Are you following? I hope you're following. Just to be safe, I'll show you what I mean. I walk up, I look at the door. It says, hello, YouTube viewers. You're so cute. And if I look away, it clears it. Exactly what we wanted. But when I look back, it doesn't put the prompt up. That is because it is still the target actor. So anytime we clear the prompt request, we also need to set target actor back to none. So we're going to set target actor, and we're not going to plug anything in, compile and save. So that way, now it will always clear the target actor, clear the prompt, and we're ready to go. And we're only sending one prompt request, so we're being efficient. Let's hit play and make sure she's working. Hello, YouTube viewers. You're so cute. Look away, look back. Hello, YouTube viewers. You're so cute. And you're so cute that you'll head over to my Twitch right now and you'll follow, because I do development streams as well as gameplay videos, and I would love if more of you guys would come and hang out and talk game dev with me. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
I wanna be the best in the game, invest in my name, check no restraints, I'm obsessed with the pain, I ingest, I retain, assess and I change, possessed by the thought I'll be free one day from society's restraints, money, clout and fame, mud, disease, a plague, we all love to hate, have to play the game, have to make a name, all our insecurities are on display. This is war with the enemy.